Hello, Indian mythology fans. My name is Sonika, and I am the author of the book Who God Really Is. Did you know that just like Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, and Australian Aboriginal traditions, Hinduism also has its own great flood story? The story of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood from the Hebrew Bible is highly well known. But Hinduism also features a great flood story, and today I'm going to present it to you. As always, after telling you the story, I will teach you the very useful lessons of this ancient Hindu myth that you can still apply to your modern relationships and spiritual understanding in the 21st century. Now, Hinduism is sometimes called a complicated religion. It's why I wrote the book Who God Really Is, a book in which the principles of Hinduism are best understood and God is explained through a modern rational lens. Do grab your copy on Amazon today. Let me tell you the Hindu myth of the Great Flood now. A long time ago, during the era of the Satya Yuga, there lived a righteous king and sage named Manu. He was not just an ordinary ruler. He was a deeply spiritual man, devoted to truth, righteousness, and the well-being of all creatures. Every day he performed intense penance and prayers, seeking divine wisdom. One morning, as Manu bathed in the river and prepared to offer water in prayer, he noticed something unusual, a tiny fish wriggling in his cupped hands. As he was about to release it back into the river, the fish spoke in a gentle voice. "O great king, please don't put me back in the water. I am small and helpless, and the larger fish will eat me. Protect me, and I shall one day save you from a great disaster." Manu was astonished, but also full of compassion. He gently placed the little fish in a small pot and carried it home, curious about its mysterious nature. The next morning, Manu checked on the fish and was shocked. It had grown so large that it no longer fit in the small pot. Seeing this, Manu transferred it to a larger vessel. But in just a few days, the fish had outgrown that vessel. Understanding that this was no ordinary fish, Manu carefully moved it to a lake. However, in a short time, the fish outgrew even the lake. Eventually, Manu led the fish to the mighty ocean, where it swam freely, now enormous in size, shining with a divine glow. Then the fish identified itself. "O Manu, I am Vishnu, the preserver of the universe. A great flood will soon submerge the world. You must prepare to save all that is good and righteous." Manu bowed in reverence and listened carefully as Lord Vishnu gave him specific instructions. Lord Vishnu instructed Manu to build a massive boat or ark. Gather the seeds of all plants, the scriptures, and the beings needed to repopulate the world. When the flood waters rise, I will return in my fish form. Tie the boat to my horn, and I shall guide you to safety. Manu immediately began his task. He built a grand ship strong enough to withstand the stormy waters. He gathered pairs of animals, wise sages, medicinal plants, and sacred scriptures, all that was essential for restarting civilization on a good note. And then, just as Lord Vishnu had forewarned, the skies darkened, the winds howled, and rain poured down in torrents. Rivers overflowed, and the vast ocean swallowed everything. The entire earth was submerged, and only Manu's ark floated upon the endless waters. True to his promise, Lord Vishnu appeared again in his fish form, now a gigantic golden Matsya, or fish with a single long horn. Manu fastened the ark to Lord Vishnu's Matsya incarnation, using the serpent Vasuki as a rope, and Matsya led the boat or ark through the stormy seas. For days, Manu and the beings aboard the ark drifted on the vast floodwaters. Finally, as the flood began to subside, the ark came to rest upon the peaks of the Himalayas, or sometimes Mount Meru, in different versions of this Hindu myth of the Great Flood. After the floodwaters receded, Manu was left with the task of repopulating the earth. He was alone in his ark, along with the animals and sages, and while they had the potential for renewal, there was still one crucial element missing for the continuation of humanity: a woman. Manu sought divine guidance and was told to perform a special ritual. He was to offer a sacrifice of butter and sour milk into the sea. Manu performed this ritual for 1 full year, offering butter and sour milk into the sea every day. These offerings were meant to appease the divine powers and set in motion the particles of creation for the first or of the first woman, who would be called Shatarupa. After a year of this dedicated ritual, a divine transformation occurred. From the water of the ocean, Shatarupa, the woman, emerged. She was radiant, beautiful, and perfect in form, and she was created for the sole purpose of partnering with Manu to bring about the rebirth of humanity. Together, Manu and Shatarupa became the ancestors of all human beings, ensuring that life would continue in the new era after the Great Flood. So what are the fascinating lessons that we learn from this Hindu myth of the Great Flood? To begin with, let's understand the growth of the fish from earlier on in this Hindu story. The fish is revealed to be an incarnation of Lord Vishnu, and the fact that it continues to grow at almost every stage of its existence symbolizes that God needed to spread in this world. That is why the Great Flood had to come about. There needed to be an overgrowth of God in this world. More space needed to be created for God in this world. And that is what is being implied or indicated, taught to us by the tremendous, almost extraordinary, really extraordinary growth of this fish at every stage of its existence. Again, remember, the fish is the incarnation of Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu's voice comes through the fish to Manu. And so the fish needed to grow because the earth needed more of God. Growth of God needed to occur on earth. Remember also that the fish says to Manu, "Protect me, and I shall one day save you from a great disaster." Here, God is revealing to us the symbiotic relationship between the animal kingdom and human kingdom. God is actually indicating to us the importance of this symbiotic relationship. Protect me and I will protect you. I'm sure a lot of people who care for the environment will really value this part of this Indian myth of the Great Flood. Because here God is actually revealing to us many thousands of years ago that humans are meant to have a healthy, symbiotic, protective, and self-protective relationship with those that, we share the earth experience with, the earth with, the other kingdoms, the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. Now here is an interesting fact about the fish appearing in the Great Flood myth. In the Hebrew Bible, in which we have, the story of Noah and the Great Flood appear, God doesn't say that he will destroy the fish of the sea. He says I'll destroy the plants, I'll destroy the living creatures on the land and the birds of the sky, but he doesn't mention fish specifically in the Hebrew Bible in the story of Noah and the Great Flood. And here we have a fish being quite divine in nature, quite valuable in nature in the Indian myth of the Great Flood. So could this just be coincidence? Maybe, but maybe not. If you are enjoying this podcast, please leave a rating or review. I will really appreciate it. Now, if the fish is meant to symbolize the need for the earth to have an overgrowth of divine wisdom, of divinity, and the great flood will bring about that clean slate that's needed for an increase or overgrowth of divinity on earth, then why does suffering come about again anyways on the earth? After the great flood has receded, after the land is all dry, after Manu is perfectly fine, and after Manu and Shatarupa repopulate the earth again with humans. Why? It's because suffering is meant to exist alongside goodness. And Manu is a human being at the end of the day. He is, yes, a very wise sage, no doubt. He is a ruler, no doubt. He's a wise, righteous king. Yes, but he's still a human at the end of the day. Remember, Lord Vishnu is the fish. He's a divine conscious being separate from the character of Manu. And this is intentional. Manu is the one who develops the ark, who builds the ark, who gathers and determines who is to go into the ark. And because Manu is the one who determines, all the living creatures that are going to be saved and brought into the ark, it is Manu's intelligence or the result or product of his intelligence that will be allowed to repopulate the earth. And not all of them will be full of goodness. How can they be? Because only God is perfect goodness. So on earth again, even after this great flood in this Indian myth, suffering is bound to come about again. We live in a cycle of goodness and suffering, or chaos and peace. That is the nature of reality as it is. That is why Lord Vishnu does not give very specific instructions to Manu as to who to bring into the ark and how to, all the logistics of that. It's Manu who ultimately determines all the logistics and who comes into the ark and all of that. And Manu is a human after all. So the products of his determination here, his decision of who goes into the ark will manifest, will become apparent as life kind of comes about on the earth again after this great flood. And it will be a life that is marked by both suffering and goodness. In the Bible, they call this the clean and the unclean, right? The clean animals and the unclean animals. So the unclean animal symbolizing the growth of suffering, which will occur alongside the growth of goodness after that great flood of the Hebrew or Christian Bible concludes. So this distinction is important to understand. It's important to understand that Manu was instructed to build the massive ark or boat, but he wasn't given extremely specific instructions as to who to gather and what to bring into the boat. Now, it's important that for you to recognize that the scriptures went into this ark, the holy scriptures. That is because life cannot sustain itself without wisdom and knowledge. Then, as the Hindu myth of the Great Flood moves along, we see that Lord Vishnu transforms or incarnates as a giant golden fish called Matsya with a single horn, and he is used as the anchor to carry Manu and all the other living creatures, including the ancient scriptures, through the stormy time, through chaos. They are saved, they are preserved. And this is important for us to realize. It is through our personal stormy, chaotic seas, the seas that are caused by, first and foremost, our inner demons within us. It is important to realize as those stormy seas and the chaos rises within us due to our inner demons, God can be our anchor. We can use God to be our anchor in those times so that we may ultimately preserve ourselves, so that we may live and ultimately move out of suffering into a higher state of being while living on the earth, while in a physical body. This is what the Indian myth of the Great Flood is trying to get through to us postmodern world readers in the 21st century. There's still so much value in reading, in understanding the symbolism, and the scenes of ancient Hindu stories. Now, it would be remiss of me to not mention that this Indian myth highly values the importance, the position of women, or the goddess energy, the fertility goddess, for the continuation of humanity. Manu sought divine guidance. He knew that he needed a woman in order for humanity to continue on the earth after the great flood. And notice his sacrifice is butter and sour milk. It's not just water or oil. It's something quite sumptuous, right? There's a deliciousness to the butter and sour milk. It's sumptuous. It might be thick. So here we have an allusion through these items being made to fertility and womanliness, to birthing hips. And he's offering this, in fact, to the divine feminine, or as Hindus refer to her as Durga or Devi, Shakti, the feminine energy. Because the feminine energy needs us to give something more of substance to her. The reason it's not oil or water or just simple milk as we may offer to, let's say, Lord Shiva, is because the divine feminine in Hinduism, Durga, Devi, Shakti, she needs us humans to offer more substance to her in order to feel valued, in order to be valued, in order to recognize in us that we recognize in her tremendous value and power. This is what is needed. She allows us to dig the deepest in our states of suffering and rid ourselves of that suffering from those extremely deep ancient places in us. She is the one who allows us to reach those places. Therefore, if we want to reach the deepest, we have to give something of more substance to her in our worship of her. In our worship of, again, Durga, Devi, Shakti, the divine feminine energy. Hinduism understands energy the best. And this is why in this Indian myth of the Great Flood, Manu, the human, the wise king and wise sage, offers butter and sour milk in order to bring about the first woman after the Great Flood concludes. Shatarupa comes about because real substance of value, something of value and greater substance is offered to Mahadurga, to Mahadevi, to Mahashakti, the divine feminine, the divine mother in this Hindu myth. I am reminded here of what I write in my book, Who God Really Is. Quote unquote, know thyself is a popular phrase, but very few of the individuals who proclaim it actually know themselves to their deepest reaches, extents, or depths. Very few of them are truly self-mastered. To go the deepest, to reach the deepest parts of oneself where corruption, ancient karmic corruption lies, fragmentation of the spirit and distance from the soul lies, one must sacrifice to the most balanced understanding and self-sacrificial being, God. To reach the deepest, we must first reach for the highest, through active dedication worship of God. That is a quote from my book, Who God Really Is. To understand what I mean much better, do grab your copy of my book, Who God Really Is, on Amazon today. You are strongly encouraged to do so. So how can one use this specific knowledge about the worship of the divine feminine, of Mahadurga, Mahadevi, Mahashakti in their human relationship building processes in the postmodern world in our 21st century? Well, if you are someone who would like the attention of a specific good woman, a wise woman, if you are someone who would like to gain favor from a wise or a good woman, then you would want to offer something of more substance to her. You want to demonstrate more appreciation than you might to, let's say, some guy friends, some male friends. That is the difference. Hindu mythology is teaching us the difference between the masculine mind and the feminine mind. And it's important to recognize these differences in order to gain favor from the kinds of people we want to gain favor from. We understand this through how the gods are to be worshipped, how God is to be worshipped, his female face and his male face through Hindu rituals and practices. If you have found it somewhat difficult to understand God well through the often complex Hindu stories, then do read my book, Who God Really Is, on Amazon. It is a book in which the principles of Hinduism are best understood and God is explained through a modern, rational lens. Thank you for listening, and I'll speak with you in the next episode.